Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of HardcoreGaming101.net's top 47,858 games of all time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate on Twitter. My name is Xerxes, and this article's lead section may not adequately summarize key points of its contents. My panelists today are...
I'm Bobinator.
Buys the bulb.
I'm Carl.
Satanga here.
On this podcast, we have but 3 rules. La règle numéro 1. All rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate. La règle numéro 2. You can nominate 3 games at a time via Twitter by hitting me up at GC9X. La règle numéro 3. You can nominate games that have already been nominated, but please don't nominate games that we've already ranked. If you want to see the master list, you can do so. Check it out for yourself. bit.ly/47k games. That's bit.ly/47k games.
Apply directly to the forehead.
When was that? Was that, 2008, 2009?
Wow, I don't even remember.
It's a long time ago.
I forget what television is, but it was around that time when that was a thing. So
I think I have one somewhere.
Head on?
No, a TV. So our first game for the show is Mario Pinball Land, which was nominated by @MiloScat, who we already did a game from, I believe, just this last episode, right?
I do seem to remember a guy named Scat, so that would probably be correct. How many people would seriously call
We're not supposed to do, we're not supposed to do the same nominator back to back, but be that
it's a bit late now.
It's too late now. So,
well, it seems
@MiloScat, you done lucked out.
It seems we've fallen to a quota now of taking on a Mario game, which we've done for the past 3 episodes, including this one. And I think part of that goal is finding out how many spin-offs he's been in and how many spin-offs kind of suck. Because we were all that fond of Yoshi, and, well...
At least no one's nominated in Mario's early years yet. Please don't nominate
I wanted to point out, I did listen to the Yoshi episode, and I did want to point out that I think that was a pet project of Gunpei Yokoi, and that's just something that he wanted to put out. That's why he put out like that Yoshi. I believe he created Yoshi.
Well, that's why Miyamoto keeps trying to kill the character.
I think he created at least the puzzle game.
This seems like it's kind of late, though. But no, you're right. He was still at Nintendo at that time.
He didn't leave until the Virtual Boy died.
Right.
That was like 96?
Right. That seems uncharacteristically kludgy for Mr. Yokoi. He usually was, his input on games was actually pretty limited. He was mostly a tech guy.
He helped out with Super Mario Land and a few other things, and he also made a really decent puzzle game called Gunpei, which is named after him, but it was on the WonderSwan and the PSP and DS.
But didn't it come out after he died?
Yeah, it was posthumous, but he made it. The WonderSwan version, I believe, is the one that he made because he died when he was working on the WonderSwan. He
was working for Bandai at that time.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Bandai are genuinely monsters.
Well, it's kind of interesting that he actually left Nintendo because although to resign in disgrace is not actually all that common, especially not in the 90s. People would just get shuffled off to some, if they felt like you were too old and you'd messed up too much, they would kind of shuffle you off to some part of the company where you'd still draw a huge paycheck but couldn't do any real harm.
It's really interesting.
Everyone in Konami.
He created some of the biggest things that Nintendo's known for. He created the D-pad, he created the Game & Watch games and the Game Boy, and a lot of the good games for early Game Boy. He
had a lot to do with all of the hardware design for all of Nintendo's hardware up through the Virtual Boy. I believe.
He made a lot of the toys too for the company.
Yeah, even before. Right. Yeah. Yeah. He was the genius on which the company. I know everybody says Miyamoto was kind of the formative or the most important figure in early Nintendo, but it's really not true. Miyamoto was definitely important, but you would not have any of this stuff if it weren't for the guy who was able to
without the
make
Game
toys.
and Watch, nothing would have gone anywhere.
Right.
Did Gunpei do the stretchy hand thing as well, or was that someone else?
Ultra Hand, that was his.
Yeah, that was the big thing.
I mean,
but
all kinds of crap back then.
In case you're wondering, this is how exciting Mario Pinball is.
Yeah,
right.
Last episode we covered Super Mario Bros. 3, and now we're kind of way on the other end of quality.
Right. So, all right, Mario Pinball Land.
I love this cutscene, by the way, at the beginning of the game.
With the one where they smash Mario into a perfect sphere?
Well, they test it first on a toad. Like,
oh man, it's kind of like the Mushroom Kingdom's like Tuskegee experiment, isn't it? So things got dark really fast. Sorry. Mario Pinball Land came out in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance. It was created by UK-based developer Fuse, who also made Metroid Prime Pinball the very next year. That tells you how late it was in the GBA's lifetime. I would say that Metroid Prime Pinball is definitely a much better game. Apparently, according to Wikipedia, which, as we all know, is the sole arbiter of truth in the 21st century, even the people who worked on this game, apparently, according to Wikipedia, admitted that they kind of messed it up. I'm really surprised Nintendo released it at all, because it was so late in the GBA's lifetime. It's like, what would you stand to lose by just letting it die?
Well, I guess it was finished.
I'm a huge video pinball fan. Like, I like pinball in all of its forms. And I like video pinball a lot. Like, I went through all of my systems and got all the pinball games I could and played them all, right? This game is one of the worst. It's really the physics and the lack of level design.
Wow, that's pretty heavy. That's a harsh call.
And that's all pinball is. It's physics and level design.
Yeah, it's not like you expect every virtual pinball title to be Naxat's Crush trilogy. But
no,
this
I don't
is
expect it to.
Yeah, but this is...
I like that you do them the courtesy of calling them Naxat when we all know they're Taxan.
Taxan, either or.
I do like the idea that they try to make it more like a mainline Mario game.
Yeah.
Sort of the Mario equivalent of Sonic Spinball, but even Spinball's way better, I'll be honest.
I'm glad you mentioned Spinball, because it's basically Spinball's bonus stages, except a full game.
I was about to say...
Spinball's a better game.
No, this game is nothing but bonus stages. My main problem with it is that it has no such thing as a main table. And call me a purist for pinball, but you need at least a 2 or 3 screen central table where all the stuff's interconnected. No, this completely misses the point of a pinball game.
Wait. No, this is not a pinball game. It is a pinball adventure. I want to say, I don't think that come on. Just because nobody, all right, so... I want to say, the one thing in the plus column I have for this is that the idea itself I do not think is bad. The adventure elements, like the unlocking the stargates and stuff like that, it's not a bad idea. But the thing you got to understand about this game is if you're watching on the YouTube version, you'll see exactly what we're talking about. But the play field is exactly the size of a GBA screen, which means it's kind of maybe two French postage stamps right next to each other or something, kind of big, but
this game is definitely let down.
It's not like
by the
GBA can't do good pinball, because Pinball the Dead's pretty decent. Sonic Pinball Party is okay, but at least in those you can actually kind of see what you're doing and everything's not super zoomed in.
Wait a minute.
This one is the play fields for pinball games are almost barren. Usually you'll have 2 or 3 elements on the table at a time.
There's not much space, really, is there?
And you also have Pokemon Pinball Sapphire and Ruby. That was a really great game.
Yeah, no, that's
not
the best
really sort of choice.
Yeah,
does this game even bother to have the rumble function?
No.
That
this game doesn't
Game Boy
even have
Color
a save function.
No, it has a save function.
It does, yeah.
Are you sure?
It does.
Pretty sure it does.
You have to pause the game and quit, I believe, to save.
Or you can just give up when you die.
But my biggest problem is that it feels like a Euro game, and not that all Euro games are bad, but it feels like a cheap Euro game that that has sprites and characters borrowed from Nintendo. You know what I mean? And
usually though, when to say that, I mean, I know you don't mean it in an insulting way, but usually I think when I hear that, I'm thinking what you really kind of mean is that you mean it was made by 2 people.
No,
Like-
I mean, like, it feels like one of those cheap Euro shmups, but a pinball game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's got that heavily over-rendered look to it. I feel.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
it clearly
they're
misses the
digitized,
point of a
like, yeah.
pinball game.
And the music is so, like, snore-inducing. Like, it's not typical Mario kind of stuff.
It does feel kind of like, Euro demo scene music, but not very good.
I don't know.
Can I go
didn't
into my
think it was
issues with
fair.
this game?
Yeah.
The thing with this game is you kind of know what you're supposed to be doing. That's not the hard part. But the physics are so bad that you're just doing the same thing over and over and never getting anywhere.
I get the impression that the physics in this game were designed without, like, you really had to, it's like they were based off of some other game that wasn't using the GBA's resolution, because the playfield is very, it's very horizontal, very squat, you would say, and it doesn't feel like you have the kind of control over the ball to get it to those sides of the table, which in this game you have to be able to do.
And the ball
have
is
to have-
obnoxiously fast.
Right. Yeah, you have to have absolute control over. You have to have absolute control over the geometry of your shots, because you can't. You got to beat bosses in this game. You can't do that.
This game, it doesn't have a nudge button. There's no way to change the direction.
Yeah.
Right.
As a big pinball fan, like, I play a lot of the pinball arcade, for realistic pinball simulation of real tables. And it should get, there is a luck element to pinball. There's no doubt about it, but it should get a point where you can do a lot of things out of skill. You should be able to predict where you can shoot things. You that is the part of the game that you can control is capturing the ball and shooting it.
Right. It's
Like
very
that's
timing based as well, right? Like when the ball rolls over the paddle, when you activate the paddle.
Yeah, and you are supposed to. That's the part you can control, and that's where the skill comes in. And the game makes it very difficult to predict where the ball is going to land. And that even the most skilled player, somebody who plays a lot of pinball, I play a lot of pinball, even real pinball, video pinball, and I can't. It's really difficult for me to place where the ball is going to be.
I'm glad you said that, because I couldn't tell whether it was just because I sucked at playing video pinball. I am pretty good at like those. Like I've got like the the Gottlieb and Williams collection of whatever, which I know isn't like the most perfect physics for pinball, but they do, like, you can get good at those games, at those tables. Sure.
Yeah,
in those games.
I usually have like one good ball out of 50 to 100. Otherwise, there's just a lot of failure in there.
What this game needed was kind of a way, not a tutorial, but a way of, first of all, the physics had to be better. They had to work. But on top of that, because it's a Mario game and you're getting younger players than you ordinarily would, I think you owe it to your players to, like, kind of not necessarily coach them, but like design the tables in a way that you will naturally learn the skills you need to learn in order to excel at the game by playing
You're just kind of dropped in the deep end as it is. You're just going to expect to figure things out.
What is it going to teach you, really? Like, it's like you use flippers and then the game screws you over a lot. Like, that's
right. Well,
it's the full experience.
This is my thought on it. It feels like a very cheap iPad, like free iPad pinball game, but this is a Nintendo product. Nintendo is known for their polish. They're known for generally great products, and it doesn't feel like that. It feels cheap. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It's probably my least favorite Nintendo pinball game. It's even above. It's below Pinball. NES Pinball,
which for its time wasn't that bad. This is late in the GBA's life cycle, so it really should have been a little bit better.
I mean, why did Nintendo have to fart out another Mario game like this? Like, they already were resting on so many different avenues for Mario. Like, he had so many sports games, and I guess this is around the time, like, Mario DDR was becoming a thing. Like, why did this even have to be made?
I think part of it is, it's you mentioned earlier, but it's a late life Game Boy game. I'm sure Nintendo were like, whatever, it's fine.
I guess my also another big thing that I have with it is that all of the play fields are completely barren. It relies on
stuff popping up, and
it relies on the enemies to be the level design, which they're supposed to be replacement for bumpers in a pinball game, and it's okay to have like moving bumpers because video pinball is supposed to do things that only video pinball can do. It's not supposed to be a
right. But my biggest problem with the game is that the playfields are so small that they reset every time you drop down to another playfield.
And that's going to happen.
So when you go back up, and it happens a lot, I'd always like unlock one of the stars, and then for some reason I would I don't know, my nerves would get to me, and then I'd lose the ball and go down the previous playfield. You go back up, you have to unlock that damn star again. It's not still there.
This is a pinball game that has 0 ramps, I believe, which is I don't know, that's some sort of sin.
That's it. Yeah, that's really it for me. And you also continuously on the screens with a shop in it, you continuously go into the shop when you don't want to, and it breaks up the flow of the game. There's
like where the level select cannon that happens.
Speaking of breaking up the game, can we please rank this? I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Let's rank this thing. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we're not going to be nice to this game, let's be honest.
I want to put it in the Jones zone.
Yeah, I
okay with that.
Can barely call this a pinball game. It's more like a poorly controlling shooting gallery.
Below 8 eyes.
I'd rather play a run and gun like Ninja Commando on the Neo Geo than this, and it's barely a pinball game. It's a bad Mario game. I really don't understand why this game even exists. The only credence I'll give it, as Xerxes said, is that the pinball adventure concept is at least interesting in practice. Too bad whoever designed this
concept
screwed it.
There are plenty of games that do it and do it successfully.
Pinball Quest on the NES for one. I mean, that game's not super great, but it definitely does more with the premise than this.
Above or below Yoshi? Let's do that.
It's below Yoshi to me.
I would put it no higher than Columns. It's got to be below Columns. At least that game's 2-player and fun.
Okay, I've got a placement. This might be a little high for it, but I want to say between Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball and Wall Street Kid. Maybe
Wall Street Kid at least has an original concept.
I would put it above. I would put it above Bill Laimbeer for sure.
Really?
It's not it's bad for what we're expecting, but it
functions.
It is playable, and it's not
it'll keep your kids entertained for a bit, even if they get angry and throw the damn. You
can figure this game out. It's not. It's just it's way too frustrating for what it is. But
it's not broken or buggy.
Well,
no,
it's a little broken. It's not buggy, but it's a little made.
It's more of an issue of poor design, not necessarily poor execution.
Well,
maybe.
If Xerxes is actually putting down his beloved Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball for this one, I'm going to place it, right there, right below Hanagumi Tyson Columns.
I can work with that.
That almost seems generous, but let's just go with it.
Our next game is FireHawk, all one word, capital F, small I, small r, small e, capital H, small a, small w, small k, which was nominated by @LewisGornfeld on Twitter. It was an unlicensed game, NES game, I should say, unlicensed NES game released in 1991, developed by the illustrious Codemasters.
The twins, I believe, were involved.
It was a lot better than I ever thought it was going to be. Let's just say that.
I will say for a unlicensed NES game, this is actually pretty high quality.
Yeah,
not
the
an
music is amazing.
game, but
The music is great.
Yep. Yeah, that's the case for all Codemasters and published by Camerica games. This is one of those ones that has a fancy gold card on it, like the makers of Ultimate Stuntman and Dizzy, if you remember.
I'm not sure
Dizzy.
why Codemasters did everything unlicensed. It's not like their games were that bad.
They figured they could make more money that way.
Oh.
Because they wouldn't have to
Nintendo
pay any of
really
the
screwed
licensing
you if you
fees.
As a struggling up-and-coming independent book publisher, I can kind of understand that, but...
Well, you could control the amount of carts you produced. So
yeah, they had
if you
that,
were selling really big in Milwaukee, but not selling really big in Mobile, Alabama. Like you didn't have to buy like 10,000 carts, from Nintendo, which is what you would have to do if you made a licensed game. The problem is that you also didn't have the benefit of stores wouldn't stock your game because Nintendo would threaten them. If you stock an unlicensed game, we are cutting you off.
Yeah.
So,
At least Tengen did a good job at getting their games out there and fighting them. That was Atari and Midway there,
and
but
secretly Namco, right?
Yeah,
Rolling
yeah.
Thunder.
Anyway, I mean, the most interesting thing about this game is it's basically kind of like Desert Strike, but it was a little bit before. It predates a little bit Desert Strike, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Precursor to that. Basically,
Like a year, maybe? I forget the exact months.
yeah, I think it was a year before, more or less. And I forget if it was originally made for the NES. I think it was made for one of Amiga's computers. The Amiga 500 I'm seeing has a
looks
version
like
of that.
looks like the NES version was the first one.
Oh, cool.
It looks like it predated the other ones by a year, but I could be wrong about that.
I have to say that it has a lot of the same concepts as Desert Strike. It's not just like superficial similarities. Like it has limited ammo, which isn't typical in this type of game, just like Desert Strike is, and just like picking up POWs and like picking up guys. It's actually kind of neat in that regard.
I wonder if there's like a source for that kind of concept. Maybe Choplifter?
Choplifter and Raid on Bungling Bay.
Yeah.
I think there's
Kind of
another game I've seen mentioned that was kind of precursor to FireHawk. Can't remember the name of it. Sorry, but it's people. I think they listed on Wikipedia and stuff as like another game.
What is also kind of neat is that you can also shoot like their logistics. Like you could shoot their roadways and their bridges and their rails for trains. I thought that was a really pretty novel in that you could limit your enemy's movement by
you
shooting.
can disrupt their supply lines, their infrastructure.
Exactly.
Do they keep respawning in this game or something? Because I don't think things respawn in strikes.
They
I
do.
think the jets respawn.
Yeah, there's a little bit of there are differences, and it's top down. I know that if you're watching the video, you'll see that, but it's not the legendary sort of 3/4 view that I think Desert Strike is sort of known for.
The bad guys only respawn though if the building that spawns them is still there, kind of like in like Gauntlet or something. So if you destroy what's producing them, they won't spawn anymore.
Can I give my complaint about this game real quick?
Yes.
If you
Now,
have to.
this game is made by British people, so obviously it's completely unfair. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. Maybe not as bad as a majority of Euro games at the time, but the big thing is that your copter isn't really maneuverable, so it's really hard to dodge bullets.
You have to back up if you want to dodge a lot of the bullets. You have to back up.
Back up very slowly, so you're going to get hit if you do that a lot.
Yeah,
And you don't have any sort of strafe,
It's
I don't
a very
think, in this one.
difficult game. It's a very difficult game.
I actually did rather like FireHawk at first until the standard difficulty spike of level 3. That happens in like every video game. Why is it always the third level where things get insanely difficult anyway? Yeah, level 3. Just I had
as far
to
as I got to.
cheat profusely to get in. You have to pick up like 7 prisoners, and I think that's where the enemy helicopters start in. And at the risk of alienating our UK members, why do you guys think that continues are for Yanks? and like you never put British developers never put freaking continues in their game, and that makes it a jillion times less possible to beat.
There's actually an in-game reason you only have 3 helicopters, so you don't actually have lives. You actually have 3 different helicopters. So there is an in-game reason for it.
You know what I would have done in that situation? Send all 3 out at once.
Well, my question is how come we're spending $20 billion on helicopters and we only have 3 of them?
I find it interesting. It was a UK developer like our last game we talked about, so we're kind of, you know,
Eurocentric today?
Well, no, I mean, we're just kind of like picking a lot of the not worst examples, but it's not a bad game. I'm just saying, like, it's not a great game either.
Well, it's much better than...
It's an interesting game.
It will rank higher than Mario's Pinball Land, spoilers. Yeah, I certainly do like the concept of it, the flow, the aesthetics are great.
It'd be great if it went so hard. I would have a really good time with it.
I just wish it had...
Music's pretty rad.
Yeah, I just wish it had continues or passwords or at least slightly better control. And I will say that while it's cool at first, the whole picking up the POW screen thingy where you're getting shot at by enemy helicopters while they're jumping on the rope. That's cool at first, but it gets really obnoxious quickly that you have to do this for every single POW, and then you have some dumbasses who take like a whole freaking minute to grab the damn rope. Jeez.
Yeah, I have something to say about that.
Sure.
The big issue with those scenes, they're fun at first because it's kind of like a mini shooting gallery, which, there's always kind of a little fun to break up most games.
It's almost exactly like the skeet shoot from track and field, actually. Same control.
The big problem with it is that you need an obnoxious amount of ammo to get past it. And you need basically full ammo in your machine guns, and you have limited ammo even on this screen. So you got to...
the game usually gives out a lot of ammo if you blow stuff up enough.
Yeah, but you have to pay attention to it. I guess is my complaint. Like you're automatically going to lose that screen if you run out of ammo halfway through. There's like no way to recover from it. Is I guess my problem with it.
So I guess we can probably rank this game. We've all said about as much about it as we can possibly say. Like, where do we? I mean, it is a pretty original game for its time. Like not original, but it is it's an interesting, more reality-based, shooter.
I think it's in the Haunting Nightshade area.
I was going to say below Zero 2, but maybe that's a bit harsh.
I think Zero 2 is a better game, personally, but it's...
I do, too. I would also put it below... I mean, honestly, I would put it below King's Quest V, because, again, like, there's stuff you can say about King's Quest V. Like, if you played the game for...
I don't know. Do we want to give any King's Quest but 6 that much credit?
Yeah, we do. I mean, like, King's Quest V is, like, it's got a lot of cool animations in it. It's got, like, the puzzles are stupid most of the time, but the game itself, like, as we talked about in that episode of GCI Next, which is, like, so long ago, but if you go way back in time and check out our King's Quest V episode, like, we do admit that, like, the game for its time, it was doing what players expected it to do. Like,
okay, I concede. I think I just have a bias against Sierra. I've come to realize.
I would put it in that range.
Between
I think it's like a Friday the 13th style game. It's like it's a noble effort.
Yeah, but between King's Quest V and Friday the 13th, then you think?
I'm okay with that.
I would put it below Friday the 13th because I think it's a little bit more. No. Okay, I see what you're saying. They're both kind of ambitious games for what they are. So, yeah, okay. That's true.
Okay.
All right. Anybody disagree?
This is an interesting game. It's probably really play it more than you would bother to play Friday the 13th, like, as a game. It's like...
It's close to being a good game. It's just not quite there, unfortunately.
The good thing about Friday the 13th is that it's over pretty fast.
And this
game's the opposite. You'll never finish it.
Right.
It's in that area, close to being good, but not like with Zero 2 and King's Quest V.
You know what? The music is really good in this. Let's just,
And it exceeds my expectations. I thought it was going to be a crap fest, like total, utter crap fest. So... It was a lot better than that.
Yeah, for what it is,
Codemasters could make good NES games. They made Micro Machines, didn't they?
yeah, of course. And
That's a good game.
I do like FireHawk for what it is per se, and this is going to be a little unfair to say, I think it's a little outdated, and why play this when you could play Desert or Jungle Strike, or even Red Zone, if anyone knows about that game on the Genesis.
Yeah, but Red Zone's almost harder, isn't it? But
probably even harder, except that
if we're gonna go with outdated, King's Quest V and Friday the 13th are insanely outdated.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess.
In its context, it was pretty cool. I mean, if you paid, I don't know what, you would probably pay a pretty low price for this game if you got it.
It is better than Raid on Bungling Bay, which I could never figure out.
When you get to, like, the Warrior Zero 2 and I Have No Math and all that is, I would say those are games that are close to being good, have something about them that means that they can't quite get there. Which is what I'd say this game is. If the controls were better, it'd be a much better game.
Okay.
True.
All right.
Okay, so we going to put it below I Have No Mouth or above? Or below King's Quest V or above?
I would say above.
I'm saying below King's Quest V because there's stuff that happened in King's Quest V that's interesting.
Well,
I would place it above because I have a bias against Sierra, so I'm going to stick with Bob on this one.
There's no Cedric, though.
Yeah, exactly. That's why FireHawk's rated higher. Jeez.
I don't have to play repetitious chopper segments where you gotta, shoot the damn 300 helicopters that fly at you all at once.
Okay, well, since we actually have 5 guys for once, we need Vise for a tiebreaker here. Vise, would you put FireHawk above or below King's Quest V?
The Sierra games never really clicked with me either, but if I had to pick right now whether I would play more of this game versus King's Quest, I would play more of this game because King's Quest always just super frustrated me. I didn't even get the humor when I first started playing the games. That's my fault, I guess, because I didn't get it. But the first one I ever played was King's Quest 1 on the Sega Master System, a bad version, I'm sure. But I died on the first screen because I didn't know that you can't just walk into the moat. So.
Yeah, we all did that. I gotcha.
So I when I was messing around with Master System ROMs, that was my first King's Quest experience. So I don't know. I can't compare it to Friday the 13th because I didn't play it.
You broke the tie though. But you said it's better than King's Quest V, so that's 3 against 2, right?
So sorry, Roberta Williams.
I Have No Mouth is better, than this game for sure.
That's fair.
I agree.
It's really difficult, but it's
below.
Much game.
Below I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream, and FireHawk goes right above King's Quest V. Okay, our third game for this show is Ranger X, which was nominated by Rock and Roll, which is spelled WROK and WROL. Very interesting. Sounds like a bad, made-up sushi roll.
I had that one tonight, in fact.
Yeah, so Ranger X came out for the Genesis / Mega Drive in 1993. It was developed by GAU Entertainment. Is it GAU or is it GA?
I'm sure it's GAU.
GAU, because they're all capitalized.
The only game company to have been headquarters right in the Veldt of all places.
Yeah, I know.
I made a Final Fantasy VI. I had to say it.
Right? Is that how the... Anyway,
Yeah,
they
yes.
also did Crusader of Senti, which is another good Genesis game.
Was it them,
Fire
or was it
Zelda.
technically them, but they were a different company at that point, I think?
I don't know. I don't have too much on Gal. They're sort of one of those like almost shadow developers like Toza.
Like
they actually
made,
had their name.
They made
Ranger
Ranger
X,
X, and then
aren't
I think they flipped
They
out.
changed
and,
their name,
Okay,
right?
I-
They
I
changed
got
their
you.
name. They merged with different companies, but they're still, still technically around, I guess.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they also did Crusader of Senti, which is pretty good. I don't know. I would say this is very, very similar to Alien Soldier, and that's a short game, but a technological masterpiece in terms of what they accomplish. It's also, I think, a little bit harder than Alien Soldier.
Really? You think that?
Maybe, maybe not. It's pretty fair, but Alien Soldier does have that slow down thing you can do.
It's more of a midpoint between Alien Soldier and the Assault Suits games. Assault Suits Lenos, also known as Target Earth on the Genesis.
It's very similar to Target Earth
and
Target Earth,
Cybernator, Assault Suits Falcon on the SNES.
Yeah, it's very similar to the Assault Suits games. It's better than the Assault Suits games, I might add.
I would say so.
Yeah,
yes.
we would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, it controls better at least. You're not having to manage 360 targeting. No, that funky motorcycle thing you have auto targets for you, which is pretty rad.
It has really good points for style too. I mean, there's cinematics, and I love those vector screens at the beginning of each mission.
Oh yeah, the
This game
cutscenes
is
are
a
awesome.
visual marvel, and I can't deny that.
It really it's exactly the kind of game I would point to when I say why I feel like the Genesis
did what Nintendo don't.
Well, no,
Classic
not
process.
so much, because there were definitely games on Super Nintendo that, from a tech standpoint, outshone anything on the Genesis without question. But it's because it was a console that was developed and released a little bit later. But the Genesis had this kind of soul to it and I'm not a big Genesis fanboy. I had a Super Nintendo. I did not have a Genesis, but I feel like it attracted a lot more of these kinds of developers, the people who would make a game this weird and niche and polished.
Yeah, and used a lot of trickery. Yeah,
right.
Visual trickery to get what needed to get done. And
It's a treasure-esque game. It's a treasure-worthy game for the Genesis.
It's a very interesting one because in terms of it's like kind of a treasure game, but it's also mixed with almost like a more approachable sort of normal Mega Drive game. Like it's halfway between that sort of thing. Like it doesn't go all out like Treasure tended to do, where it's just like just crazy crap just all the time. Whereas this one has it has a leveled approach. You actually go through a level with enemies that go up against you. Then you fight a boss, and it's nice linear, like sort of solid stuff going on. It doesn't keep throwing everything at you. It sort of lets you experience a level rather than set pieces, I guess.
I do have a criticism here. This is a modified run and gun game, right? This very much kind of a run and gun game with some unique things about it. Usually in really good run and gun games like the good Contra games, like the best Contra games, if you get hit, it's always your fault. Because it's just that tight. Ranger X is not like that, though.
No.
It's
You will
a
take
little unfair sometimes.
Well,
I don't think it's unfair as much as it is. A lot of these robot games do that, where they're like, well, you have 1,000 health, and you're going to lose 500 by the end of the stage, and you don't get to decide that. Just don't get hit too much.
You have to decide where you're going to absorb your damage, yeah.
Exactly.
I kind of have something to say.
And it gives you options in which to take your hits. Like you can hide in your motorcycle and have another bar of health. I mean, you can do that.
I have to kind of be the voice of dissent on this game. It's not bad. I'm definitely not bad. Let me make that clear. But I'd say it really kind of lacks polish compared to Treasure stuff. And there's a lot of points where the kind of cracks start to show, so to speak, and it kind of can't really hold itself together.
Can you give us one example so we don't...
Yes, Stage 2, pretty much all of it.
Stage 2 is the worst one, I think. It's kind of plotting. It has several unfair points where you just have to lose health to get to your.
But you're supposed the game expects you to lose health. Yeah, it's not the whole point.
It's not like a you get hit and die game. It's not Contra. It's like it's an attrition sort of thing. You fight in your robot suit. Have you not seen like a robot anime? They get hit all the time.
Yeah, why would you even send okay, we're going to develop a robot and send him into battle, but he can only get hit 2 or 3 times. Like, that's not what the whole point of having a robot plus an additional sentient robot motorcycle.
Okay, I don't disagree.
You have to be an expert at this game to play it well, though. Not that that's a bad thing necessarily, but it does limit its accessibility. You have to admit that.
Okay,
I definitely don't disagree.
We barely talked about what distinguishes this game.
Oh, okay.
So
we're getting there.
Well, but we didn't get there.
Well, I wanted to complain a little more about stage 2,
let's go.
But
the interesting thing is, about I would say on the control standpoint, it's odd that it kind of controls like a combination of Bangai-O and Double Dragon 2.
Yep.
Yeah,
it uses the
buttons firing left and right.
It's like a super zoomed in Bangai-O because the sprite's huge. It's not really tiny. But on top of that,
sub-weapon on the middle button.
Right.
Yeah, it should be noted that this is one of those games that took full advantage of the 6-button controller around this time, as the other button controls your motorcycle assistant independently, which I actually think
is really cool. Yeah. But if you don't,
I do think it's nice that it doesn't feel like overly unfair that you don't have a 6-button controller.
Yeah, it's not necessary to have that. It's just somewhat.
Your motorcycle just spoils you if you don't have one, right?
I also like that. Yeah. Yes, I also like that it has almost 4 different types of play. Like you can hide in the motorcycle. You can ride on top of it, which is its own thing. You can be separated from it walking around, and you can fly. It has a lot of options in which you can use.
I really do like that this game has that, like, you really feel like you have like a mech. You feel like you're like in a cool Japanese giant robot sort of thing. You don't feel like you're like just a person in a robot suit. You feel like you're in like an actual mecha sort of thing, which I think is really, really nicely done in Ranger X.
I agree. And oddly enough, it's the press up to jump / use your rocket boosters type thing, which I normally hate. But that's actually what kind of gives it that feeling. They do a lot with that.
Yeah, it's like Bangai-O in that respect as well.
Yeah, because you're not jumping, you're flying, sort of. You're propelling yourself.
Yeah, you use your jets. I think it's a little bit like the later parts of eSWAT in a way. I'm not 100% sure, but it's kind of got that same sort of jetty fly.
Yeah. So
like eSWAT.
I want to say, like, there are details in this game. So in addition to the helper kind of robot / pet thing that you have, which is a motorcycle on some levels, and on some stages it's a kind of like flying thing that shoots down laser beams from above, which is kind of cool. What I really love about this game, though, are the details in it that you just don't see in other games. You don't even see them really in treasure games. They are really artistic things. Like, I would say that
the sense of scale, you mean? Like,
yeah, but the levels are very small, but they're very methodical. Like, you have to think about what you're going to do. Like, you play them and you develop a plan, and you're like, okay, I'm going to absorb a lot of damage on this spot, but I know I can do this next part without getting hit too many times. But on top of that, there are all these little things. Every stage has its own gimmick. In stage 2, for example, which people were, I can't remember who, but somebody was saying that it was the worst stage in the game.
I do not like that stage.
But it's a cave stage. And the interesting thing about it is that there are bat enemies, which will kind of like fly after you. And then there are also these like weird little larvae type things that.
Yeah, when you shoot the eggs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
right.
They're
like super hard to kill, and they fill up the corridor, and you can't really avoid them, so you just end up taking tons of damage.
Did you know that you can shoot at stalactites in the ceiling, and it will let in shafts of light, which will destroy those little larvae?
I did not actually know that.
I did chance upon
flamethrower pretty easily on them as well. Your sub weapons are very good for their specific uses. Like the grenade launcher is made for specific parts of that level.
If you ask me, that homing eagle just trumps every other weapon there is.
Like split laser thing that will shoot. There aren't that many special weapons, but the ones that there are you do have to strategize as to when you're going to use them.
Well, the game doesn't waste anything, really. Everything is, like, as you said, it's a tight experience. So, like, this is it. We've made it. It's good. We're done.
So we have the, like, shafts of light that you expose in the cave that will stop the bats in their tracks and give you a chance to kill them, and it will kill the weird little caviar-type larvae thing that will come after you. But in the next stage, which is a kind of forest stage, you have, instead of the motorcycle, you have this like weird like flying thing that will hover above you and will shoot lasers down. But on top of that, that is above like the tree line. It's above the tree canopy in the forest. When you jump up and use your rocket boosters to go above the tree canopy, the screen will light up. And then when you drop back down below the tree canopy, it darkens. It's a interesting trick. It's not using real lighting, of course, but that's something that how many 16
That's a very tough trick to do, even on the SNES. Like,
I think it would be, yeah. But they did it, and on top of that, they had the idea to do it. Even if it were easy to do, nobody, I think, would do that. How many games do you have that take place in the forest where you can jump up above the tree line, but nothing really changes? It's still looking. This game is representing the fact that there are kind of trees that are blocking the light when we're underneath them, which is a very,
it's very like it's a detail that you had to actually program in a big way. Like, I know people go on like Alien Soldier, they talk about how it's like, oh, the smoke moves because like you're going fast, and it's like, but this game does that in lots of different ways, like these high details that you don't even notice.
There aren't that many stages, but everyone has a thing to it.
I really like the art style because it kind of shows like the little people that are running around kind of have like a futuristic medieval look to them.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Right.
You don't like really see it up close until the very end of the game if you get that far. But the atmosphere almost makes me think that this game might have been actually based off of an anime series that was out around this time.
I don't think it was, though.
No, I'm not saying it was, but it at least seems to really have that
just channeling a lot of the
exactly.
style.
I mean, it's got other cool, like the boss battles, I think, are in some ways like a weaker point of the game because I think they drag them out too long because the game's not that long.
They are nice full-screen bosses, though.
But they have cool effects in them. Like, for example, the boss of Stage 2 is that weird circular hive-type thing where you've got this amazing parallax effect on the.
I have no idea, legitimately, how they did that.
I can't figure it out either. I think it's a super dense, super scalar type.
Are you talking about Boss 2 or Boss 5?
Boss 2.
It's Boss 2. Boss 5 has like just kind of like the standard pixel shuffling that you get.
Wasn't Boss 3 the one with the lake?
Yeah, so
Boss 3 has the two tentacles, right? Which is another thing where they have like the weird sphere tentacles that you see in a lot of Super Nintendo games. Like, I mean, that's in like freaking Joe and Mac and shit.
They do it in treasure games as well.
Right.
All of
but
them.
The interesting thing about this game is that they shade the sphere tentacles differently because one of them is in the background. So even though it will touch your character without really obviously it's not literally like 3D space, but it looks more real, even though they're weird, like bright.
They give them depth
but it gives it depth of field a little bit. The game does a lot of tricks like that even a lot of treasure games would not bother with. They would do something else. They could have done, but they did.
I think it's in the background of the fourth stage where they have like lights in the background, but they're not sprites. They're actually like they're sprites, but they're like just sprites sitting in the background, so they move like really realistically compared to like a background layer. It's like
it's the skyscraper level, right?
Yeah, that's my personal favorite.
They have a mix of sprites and background tiling, and it looks completely different. Like you're like looking at lights on like a airstrip or something. I have no idea what it's supposed to be, but it's just really like unique and distinctive.
Looks really good for what it is, and it's got this cool atmospheric music. I mean, the only real thing I would say about this game that I don't like is that the controls are harder than diamonds. They're crazy. Like once you get used to it, it's great because you can have your motorcycle shooting behind you while you're shooting in front of you when you're riding on it. But the usefulness of that is pretty limited. But you can do it.
My major complaint against it, and maybe that's just the kind of game that I like, is that it has a lot more resource management than I would like in a game like this. Like, you have to watch how much you're boosting. You always have to watch your health in a game, but like you said, you're supposed to take hits at certain instances, and you can't block everything, you can't dodge everything. So that's a much more precious resource than in a lot of other games. You have to watch the timing of things like that.
But it's a short game, and the levels are actually pretty short too.
I agree.
One other issue. One more thing is that the game, it feels like there's a lot of things there that aren't really explained very well. I mean, I guess that's kind of the given for a 16-bit game, but there's a lot of things that you wouldn't really figure out right away, like how to switch special weapons and the thing about...
That's in the manual. I mean, come on, read the manual.
I guess, but...
Look, I know no one read the manual, but so many of these games did explain a lot of what was going on in the manual. There was a thing.
Games have manuals?
You have to jump into your motorcycle buddy and press the sub weapon button to.
I will agree that
it's
is a bit
weird,
counterintuitive, and it can get frustrating. If you want, you can't quick change your weapon. I know if someone's played Alien Soldier or Hardcore, they'll be like, "What? I have to do all this bull crap?" But
no, you have to stand on your motorcycle and like swap it out with whatever's in the motorcycle. But that was them working with the limitations of everything on the Genesis had to work with a 3-button controller.
I do also think that, from a thematic angle, I think that's kind of cool. Like, it's storing your weapons and you're switching them in your bike mech thing. That's interesting.
They did something with it. It was difficult to make it work with the minimalistic 3-button controller, but they figured out a way that felt like, well, it kind of makes sense. Anyway, where do we want to rank this?
It's not better than G.I. Joe, for sure.
That game's excellent.
Sorry, I was putting it above UN Squadron.
I would say...
Oh, no. Definitely not.
This one would certainly rank very high if it weren't for the resource management and sometimes, rough and somewhat counterintuitive stage design, particularly in level 2. There are some times where you sort of have to play lawyer ball, so to speak, to keep your resources alive, and I think that does sort of slow down the pace a bit. But as mentioned, this game would be pretty darn short otherwise, so I'm not sure if that negates it necessarily. I don't know. This one's pretty tricky to rank.
I'm thinking
Speak
between
from your
Tapper
heart.
and Donkey Kong Country 3. That's where I'm thinking. Because Tapper is all about resource management, but I absolutely love Tapper. It's one of my favorite games. So, but I don't think it's. I think Ranger X is better than Donkey Kong Country 3. So that's my.
I do too. I'm not going to argue with that. We're talking about the worst of the DKC trilogy. This is one case where Genesis does do what yada yada you.
You know what? I'll allow that. I think I can work with that.
I mean, it sounds like everybody disagrees with me, but I was actually going to put it even higher. I was going to put it right above Armed Police Bat Rider.
That's where I put it. Nobody listens to me.
I listened. I didn't listen to you, but I
actually said I put it above UN Squadron, but you guys know I have it in for UN Squadron. I don't even know why.
I honestly don't think Ranger X is better than Outrun or Snatcher or G.I. Joe. I think those are all fine games that are better at what they do.
I think it's better than, I don't know about the whole list, but I think it's better than G.I. Joe.
I would place Ranger X somewhere in this field, but these are all pretty high-tier games, so I'm just going to leave it to you guys to figure it out.
It's below Blue Stinger, so that's for sure. Blue Stinger has Dogs Bower. This game has a noticeable lack of Dogs Bower or Dogs Bower-esque characters.
Where's the red key card?
Yeah. Nobody threatens to take a bath,
let's just say this: it's certainly not better than Hardcore.
No, I've deliberately put it below Hardcore in the sense that if you had to pick between Ranger X and Hardcore, it's probably Hardcore.
I think Street Fighter Third Strike is a much better game than Ranger X, but you get much more out of it.
But Ranger X is so you can't have a game these days that does what Ranger X did because you don't have those limitations anymore. It had limitations, really serious limitations to work with, and it did so much. And it also came up with interesting visual tricks that did things that even people like us who have played the vast majority of
I will give
Genesis
it points that it's better than its contemporaries. Like, it's way better than Target Earth by a long shot. And I like it a lot better than Cybernator because I can get past the second level, which...
That second level had
past the
poor
second
control
level in Cybernator.
Yeah.
And it's a better game than Metal Warriors, even, and I like Metal Warriors.
I never really got into Metal Warriors. I don't know why that one didn't jive with me for some reason.
So, okay, so everybody seems to think below you in Squadron.
Look, I mean, if I'm willing to do that, I think UN Squadron is a more approachable game. Like, it's actually, Bob's obviously, he's had a hard time with some of the elements of this.
I would put it
game.
above UN Squadron just because I feel like UN Squadron is as cool as it is.
Ranger X is a very nice game.
Where Ranger X kind of like surprises you at every turn. Like, oh my god, I didn't know the game would ever do that. That kind of thing is like, I feel like that you have to.
Well, it's one of the standouts in the entire Mega Drive library, and like
we're also about to talk about Earthbound, which I think we can mention now because a lot of the things we're going to say about Earthbound is like it does something that any game could have done, but it did it. Nobody else thought to do that, And that's, I think, in a weird way, is a lot of what you can say about Ranger X. It does a lot of things that, yeah, maybe they're mostly stylistic, but it did it, and no other game of that era thought to do that.
I definitely think that I will also say that this is one of those games that I was a Genesis kid. I grew up playing hardcore rather than Contra 3, and my favorite game of all time is Gunstar Heroes. It's also the first game I bought with my own money. I'm a big action, platformer and run and gun fan.
I do want to say one thing in this game's favor real quick, that's okay?
Please.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I hope I didn't interrupt you, Vice. I feel like this game, flaws and all, is pretty much peak Genesis, peak what the Genesis is supposed to do. A really fast, really stylish action game that has a lot of neat tricks to it.
But it also has kind of an arcade edge to it, too, which is another Genesis thing. It is one of the, in my opinion, short-list Genesis games to play.
Maybe not quite to the level of Gunstar Heroes, but still a good example of what Genesis can do.
I'd honestly only put Gunstar Heroes higher. Like, I don't think you haven't done it yet, but because it's 2-player. Other than that, I almost prefer Ranger X in a lot of ways.
I think that I'm going to be an outlier on this game because I've been hearing for years that this is one of the best games for the Genesis, and the game has never super clicked with me. I understand everything everybody is saying, and I'm a big Genesis fan, so I like this type of game. But this specific game never clicked with me for whatever.
So, a quick poll: who says below UN Squadron? Not me.
Not me,
Cal.
honestly.
I would rather play UN Squadron.
Okay, so
I
3
would
against 2.
I would too.
3 against 2, it doesn't matter.
I
doesn't
love
matter.
UN.
Your opinion is null and void. It's 3 against 2. So above UN Squadron, who says above Contra Hardcore? Not me.
No.
Sorry.
Definitely not.
Okay, so that's where it goes.
Contra.
Easy.
All right. I partially disagree, but it's science, so what can I do?
Yeah. Easy peasy. Ranger X. Okay, our last game for the show is a little game called Earthbound, which was nominated by @RynV on Twitter, RYNV, VIE. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that made-up word correctly. If Wes Anderson made a JRPG, I think that would be Earthbound.
Yeah.
It came out in 1994 in Japan, and in North America it came out in 1995. And in every other part of the world, it came out 4 years ago. It wasn't released in Europe in the 90s, I believe. It was developed by Ape, which would later become Creatures Inc., I think. And Ape was begun with none other than Nintendo, former Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi's investment, who kind of put a bunch of money into it as sort of a farm team for future weirdo game developers, which is interesting because he didn't like games. That just tells you how the way his mind worked. He could just smell money around the corner, in some way. And Mother 1, or the original, what's it called now? It's not
Earthbound Zero.
Beginnings.
Oh, Beginnings, right.
It's the official name, Earthbound Beginnings. When we did it for GC9X, it was called Earthbound Zero because it was still a ROM hack. Or Earth Space Bound. It was 2 words, I believe, for the NES. It would have been. That was the result of that initial effort by Ape Software. This one almost didn't happen. Mother 2 or Earthbound in North America and elsewhere, I guess, ran into some problems, and it was bailed out by none other than Satoru Iwata, the late Mr. Iwata of HAL Laboratories, came in and rescued it, as he had done for so many other Nintendo games, and fixed it up. I'm not really sure what stage it was in at that point, but he made it work. Would it be fair to say this game's reputation precedes itself?
Before about the time that the Mother 3 translation came out, not many people brought this up in the discussion of best RPGs of all time.
It always seemed like it was kind of ignored until emulation started becoming a big thing.
I want to say Earthbound is the ultimate cult hit. It's a big deal now, but for its time,
I said,
it's just it had to earn its place in history. I want to say.
Well, okay, so in North America, it had to earn its place in history because we did not get the original NES version of the game, which did a lot of the stuff this game does first.
I would say that even that Mother 2 or Earthbound is very much in the vein of it's a not sequel. It's it's a sequel that's actually kind of more a remake of the original than kind of like Evil Dead. Evil Dead 2 is pretty much just a remake of Evil Dead 1 that improves upon it, right? But
it makes it a different movie in a lot of ways. Just
it changes more than this game does from its predecessor.
But Mother is very much pretty much the same game but worse. So,
but only marginally worse. It's not that much. We did a GC9X episode for Earthbound Beginnings, which is how you can legally play it now. I'm sure somebody's actually dumped that ROM as well by now. It's really easy to do. Right. So
pretty much every good thing Earthbound does not quite exist in Beginnings yet.
What? No. Almost everything that's memorable about Earthbound happens in the original Earthbound, in Earthbound Beginnings.
I admit I don't want to spend too much time talking about Beginnings, because I think that Earthbound's a game that we can just discuss it on its own merits, and that would go
No, you can't. No. I disagree very strongly. It is... Mother 2 is Mother. Okay? We think of it differently in North America because that's the only Earthbound game we got for a very long time. But if you had played... now, I will say that having spent a fair amount of time in Japan, I know that their affection lies with Mother 2 as well. They consider Mother 2 or Earthbound to be the best game of the series.
And they sold tons of copies of it. Like if you go over
They sold tons of copies of both of the games. Like if you go to look for Famicom games, you're going to find a couple copies of Mother, the original Mother as well. Like they both sold a lot of games. But the thing is, like, I'm surprised that they consider Mother 2 to be as definitive as they do, because it really does not change that much from the original game. A lot of the music is even the same. It's they're using the SNES samples based music much more so, but a lot of the best songs from Earthbound really came from the Famicom Mother game.
Yeah, but they're much higher fidelity and they're much better versions. I mean,
no, that's not the point.
Well,
the melody is what you remember.
We're talking about Earthbound, not its prequel.
Okay, well, we already set the stage. Just like I said, if Wes Anderson made a JRPG, if the director of Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums made a JRPG, it would be the Earthbound series, one way or another.
It's better than the comparison that Paul W.S. Anderson of RPGs.
Don't you mean Paul Thomas Anderson?
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Paul W.S. Anderson would be.
He's the Resident Evil guy.
Paul Thomas
Anderson is the Boogie Nights guy.
Yeah. What does Earthbound do that Earthbound Beginnings does not do?
I can
wait.
answer that.
Please.
Two things. Earthbound has a lot of refinements that kind of really make it a much nicer game to play. Two, I'd say it has a sense of humor down that kind of really sets it apart from its prequel and a high majority of other JRPGs at the time.
It also has Porky as a character. It adds a lot to Earthbound that Mother did not have. That kind of really annoying antagonist that kind of starts off as your friend, but then you realize
or Pokey.
His name is supposed to be Porky. It's just a mistranslation. That's evident in the sequel. It's supposed to be Porky. It adds a really nice foil to these are the good kids going around off on an adventure, and he's one of those bad, crappy kids that really just ruins your day. And I think that is an integral part of childhood, is knowing that crappy kid who kind of hangs out with you and messes up your experience just because he's there.
The kind of kid where you knew his middle name because you always heard his parents shouting at him, so-and-so, so-and-so, but so-and-so, get your ass over here.
What I like about it is that his parents are also terrible people. They're awful, awful people in the game. And I think that no other game not too many games have I ever seen where a terrible family just exists within normal polite society. You might see that with a villain or something like that, but this is so real. This is just a crummy mother and father that barely pay attention to their kids and then treat them terribly when they do pay attention to them. I just love that aspect of it, and that is something that this game does over its predecessor. Also, the gut system is much more prevalent here. It's not very evident how big of a thing the gut system is at the beginning of the game, but later on, when you have a high enough guts to actually counteract all the big attacks that are hitting you, and you're only ticking down in health very slowly.
Let's describe this because many of our listeners will not know right away. I played the game and I didn't know what you meant by the gut system, but when you describe it, when you say what it does now, it's like an odometer, right? It's your hit points and magic points, but mostly what matters is your hit points are kind of like a ticker. Right. Yeah. So you have an odometer on your car, which tells you how many miles you've driven the car. And it's all, or the old fashioned, railroad timetable signs, like that. So it ticks down. So when you get hit hard, it doesn't, if you have 300 hit points and you get hit for 200 hit points, you don't just lose 200 hit points instantly. What happens is that the ticker starts going down really fast, but it starts going down. And if you can kill the enemy, but the real time battle kind of thing, you can still choose attacks and stuff while it's ticking down.
And what's really neat is this also applies when someone's taken too much damage, they're about to get knocked out. Because if you're fast, you can actually stop that and heal them.
The game is, the battle system is designed in some cases with that in mind. Like early in the game, you fight those trees, right?
Yeah.
Right. You fight the trees, which will, when you kill them or when you make them tame or whatever, they will burst into flames and do incredible damage to one of your characters. So the idea is that when you fight like a mobile tree plus 2 other enemies, you want to kill the 2 other enemies first and do the mobile tree last, because when you kill it, it will burst into flames and inflict a lot of damage. But if it's the last enemy, it won't actually have a chance to hurt you that badly because it won't finish ticking down.
Like the first game, Mother, is very much a carbon copy of Dragon Quest's battle system. It's almost, it looks exactly like it. It's supposed to even be kind of a pastiche of it, right? It's supposed to be a commentary on it.
In a way, it's better thought out, though.
Yeah, but you know where I'm going with this. But Mother 2 and Earthbound add this. And it adds a lot of complexity to it. You actually have a reason to pick through the menus quickly. It adds an action element to an RPG that otherwise wouldn't have any at all.
It's the only JRPG I can think of where the text display speed actually affects the gameplay.
Yeah, it's something that really helps make what I think JRPG combat is generally never super interesting, so something like that really helps mix it up and makes it something that's more worth getting into.
And I might add that Mother 3, not that we're talking about Mother 3.
Adds a rhythm mechanic to it, right?
But adds a rhythm mechanic on top of that, and you can't mess around with the other hits of the rhythm mechanic if you need to go heal your other person. It actually is to your detriment on your attack. So that adds an even further layer of how complex this battle system can get.
Which is really cool, but we're not talking about Mother 3, as you said. I mean, we're talking about Earthbound. Believe it or not, I'm one of the few people in the universe who played Earthbound Beginnings before he played Earthbound. And I really loved Earthbound Beginnings. I really loved it. And I feel like, it is grindy, but by NES JRPG standards, it's normal. And on top of that, it does a lot of very interesting things. And if you really want to hear my thoughts on it, you should listen to the GC9X episode where we did, it's probably called Earthbound Zero because it's what it was known as at the time. I feel like if we had gotten that game first, it would probably be remembered very fondly.
I think that Earthbound is a much kinder game. It's a lot easier.
It's easier than its predecessor, but I feel like by the time it came out in 1995, North America, like we had played Final Fantasy, what for us was Final Fantasy 2 or Final Fantasy 4 as it's known now. And it was made even easier. And it's an easier game than Earthbound was. Earthbound is kind of tricky. You have a very limited inventory. You can only hold so many items or things per character, and that includes things that you have equipped, which makes a big difference. You have to be very mindful of what kind of healing items you have on hand. You have to use your magic spells to get through any dungeon, no matter what part of the game you are, unless you're way over leveled, because the game is designed to require you to do that kind of thing. Requires a level of forethought on the battles or a level of strategy that is not huge. It's not revolutionary, but it's different. It's a much more so than you would see in a Dragon Quest game or even a Final Fantasy game.
My thing with Earthbound Beginnings, I'd say if you're playing Earthbound, you're probably more than likely by now playing it for the writing. And Beginnings, the writing is not quite as solid. Except for the concept, it's generally played very straight.
Yeah, I will agree, because the writing is limited by its platform. They can only translate it. Anytime you translate a JRPG in these days, you were working with less than what you started with because you couldn't fit as many things into the dialogue balloons as you could with Japanese, because that's a much more compact language than English. And on the NES or Famicom, that was even more true because you really couldn't even fit Chinese characters onto those games. You were stuck using the phonetic alphabet, or the 2 phonetic alphabets in Japanese. So you really didn't have that much. But with but the translations were good for their platforms, and both of them are. And everybody agrees that the Super Nintendo translation for Earthbound is excellent. And that's the other thing the main thing is the sense of humor for the game is very distinct.
It has a dark sense of humor. For sure.
Dark sense of humor, but a
silly one too.
Yes,
silly and dark at the same time. It's really unusual.
Hi, I still exist. I just want to say that any game where one of its major bosses is called the Plague Rat of Doom gets infinite points for me, because that's just amazing.
It's metal as hell.
Yeah.
It's not like when I say it's what Wes Anderson would do if he created a JRPG. I mean that quite literally, in that there's a lot of visual jokes. There's a lot of kind of stylistic jokes that are only funny like if you actually take the time to think about it, but they're not too funny. My favorite example is the hint guy who you find in a couple different towns. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll already have seen me do some posts about this with screenshots. But the hint guy always seems to be located in a house. But he sets up like a lemonade stand type hint thing, which only makes sense if like you're setting it up on a roadside. But he's always inside a house by himself. It's like it's an example of how the game plays around with what Japanese people think of the United States. The game is supposed to take place in like an ersatz United States. All 3 Earthbound games, I believe, are like that.
They all take place in Eagle Land, which will tell you that's supposed to be America.
But as you will know, like it's a weird hybridized version of the 1950s United States and 1980s Japan. It's very, very unique in a way because it's very distinctly Japan in a lot of ways. Right. Well, in very specific ways too. Like the payphones don't look like... Yeah. The father is never home. He's always away on business. Right.
It needs to be mentioned that this is one of the very few, if not the only RPG that takes place in a somewhat contemporary setting instead of some, like, medieval times or steampunk thingy or whatever.
It seems less revolutionary now because we have, like, the Persona games are there for all the weebs and that stuff. But at the time... Which I count myself as one. I'm not making fun of you guys.
We'll discuss that later.
I am riding off the geek cliff in the same dorkmobile.
Okay,
makes any sense. But the the thing is, I started playing this game 2 weeks ago, knowing that I was going to talk about it for this podcast. I had never played more than like maybe 3 hours of Earthbound. The game I was most familiar with was Earthbound Beginnings or Earthbound Zero. And I was anticipating feeling pretty negative about this game because I felt like it did not do enough different from its predecessor. And I stand by that in a way, but I don't feel negatively about it. I got into the game. I'm really enjoying it. I'm about halfway through right now. And I'm like hooked. And I hate JRPGs now. Like I don't want to play another one. I never want the world I want to do is play a Super Nintendo era JRPG, but
I am really, really, really not a fan of JRPGs, but the Mother series and generally anything from Nintendo, I actually don't mind them. I don't know what it is, but they don't fill me with disgust.
I played this in college when Mother 3 had just gotten its fan translation, and I had never played Earthbound back in the day, even though I had a Super Nintendo and everything. I hadn't played many RPGs because I didn't have much patience for them growing up, but now I like them a lot. My experience was that I wanted to play through all 3 games in a row. just because I do that. I will play all 3 games from a developer that had.
You like to suck as much fun out of the whole experience as possible by making it just a sort of job.
Well,
a non-paying job.
I want to see all the references. I want to see how the technology progressed. I want to see how the story progressed. So what I ended up doing was I tried playing through Mother 1 first, or Earthbound Zero as it was known at the time, and at that point we already had a ROM dump of that, and I just kept getting trounced. I kept getting murdered in that game, and I know it's supposed to be like that, and it's an old school Dragon Quest-esque game, but I got wrecked in that game, and to the point where I got frustrated, and then I heard that the second one was pretty much just a remake, so I just kind of skipped it. I was glad I did, because I absolutely loved Earthbound. I really liked it. But then I got to the third one, and I think the third one is even better. And I would even suggest playing Earthbound as just a way to play Mother 3, because Mother 3 doesn't... It takes a lot off of Mother 2. You can't play it in its own vacuum. You can't play Mother 3 without playing Earthbound. It's like I don't know, watching Empire Strikes Back without seeing the first Star Wars. It just doesn't work. As much as I love this game, I think a lot of people idolize it because and don't move past it. On top of how good it is great. Don't get me wrong, but I think the sequel is the true great game. That's just my thought on it.
I'm actually not going to disagree with you on that one. I do think that Mother 3 actually refines the formula of Earthbound down to an even finer point, and even if it maybe has a little bit less freedom in its overall design, I think it's just stratified to the point where just about anyone can get into it.
It cuts down on the filler, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a linear experience for sure.
It's challenging but very accommodating. But yeah, I would say that Mother 3 is perhaps even better. Unlike the previous 2 games, it actually made me cry at the end. So that
I was going to say Mother 3 is not that this is a Mother 3 discussion, but
well, it was an
Mother
Earthbound
3...
Beginnings discussion before. So
Mother 3 is is probably the only game to have ever made me cry, and I say that in full earnestness and as a very cynical person. It is on the level of watching. Almost like watching Schindler's List or something like that in terms of how it grips you and you're playing it, and how terrible you feel while playing it.
Wow.
It's truly a fantastic
Wow, what a ringing
experience.
endorsement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to stop my life and play this now.
Well, like I said, you need to play Earthbound first in order to play it. I would never suggest anybody play Mother 3 on its own. It is definitely a sequel. It's not like a remake like Mother 2 is of 1.
Yeah,
certainly is a direct sequel.
Yeah,
to
we don't want to
Earthbound.
say too much,
Well,
but that only really becomes apparent close to the end. That's
the impression I get is that even the people who made the games feel like Mother 2 is the real first game.
I think so too, because they never even mention the characters of Mother 1 in any of the other 2 games. The problem with sequels is that they have a trouble carrying across the same point, but also innovating upon its predecessor. A lot of times, a sequel is disappointing because a lot of times the original came out of nowhere, right? The original is what innovated, like the original Matrix, for instance. It was a movie that changed the course of cinema at that time, especially in terms of how action movies were made. None of the sequels ever lived up to that. And they were never
totally
written
sucked.
Well, yeah, but you get my point here. They could have never have made a sequel that was as good as that one, as what that movie did.
No, but if the first Matrix movie you saw or anybody could see in your hemisphere of the planet was the second one, you might have felt differently about that.
I don't think anyone would have liked to see the sex scene in that. It's impossible. No one could like The Matrix Reloaded as much.
I didn't like... Look, I was old enough and aware enough to have seen The Matrix before it became a runaway hit, and I thought it was a joke. Just to let you know, like, yeah, I thought it was hilarious. Like, this is like a gag. But the whole thing is like when he puts on like the sunglasses, like cracks his neck. I'm like, oh, I get it. This is campy. This is a joke. This is not serious. But then you see, like, a couple months later at the Academy Awards, where all the, like, it's like, you take the blue pill, you take the red pill. Which one is it? And it's like, how deep does the red? Oh my God, you guys are serious. You were making a serious movie. Oh.
What I'm trying to say here, though, is I'm not saying that this is a direct parallel. I'm saying it's actually, I think Earthbound captures the magic of the original and improves upon it. And I don't think sequels often do that.
No, I agree. I mean, we're talking about a game that, like, we can't avoid, like, the reception of the game. Like, even if you played Earthbound Beginnings first, you still were aware of Earthbound because of this game, because of where you grew up. You can't erase that part of your brain. The way this game was even advertised in the United States was
terrible,
very unique. Well, in a way,
this game stinks.
But that was the way the game would have been advertised in Japan, and
that's true.
And the guy who wrote all three games was a advertising copywriter, by the way,
and a novelist.
Right? Yeah, but I mean, he was a celebrity in Japan in a way that we can't understand now because we don't have celebrity copywriters or even celebrity columnists anymore. Like the last celebrity columnist was like what,
Roger Ebert.
No, I mean, I just like, it doesn't, like, for humor, it just doesn't. Nobody even reads newspapers anymore. It's a lost thing. All I'm saying is, I guess this is, maybe we're belaboring the point, but all I'm saying is that everything that this game does, almost everything, 95% of what this game does that people love it for, the original Mother did. It's just that we got this one first. But Mother isn't on the list. Where do we put Earthbound?
I feel like this needs a really high rating, top 10 or higher.
Yeah, for sure. No question.
Up there with
here's
Mario.
my reasoning. We want this to be high up in case we get another JRPG. I personally, in my own personal opinion, feel that any other JRPG of the same period would not be better than Earthbound, and I want the list to reflect that.
There's only one or two that I would put in. Yeah, Final Fantasy VI, or if you want to look at Final Fantasy V and the same, I would not, for different reasons, I would put it up. Chrono Trigger.
Even then, though, like, Earthbound has so many good gameplay decisions that those games do not do that I feel gives it the edge.
Yeah, and I would still recommend that if anyone wants to play Earthbound Beginnings, I would say, like, maybe you should play Earthbound first, or you can play Earthbound Beginnings and play it with like an IPS patch that makes it easier to less grindy, and then do that. But that's not the game that's officially out there. That would be the way I think to start, because there is a little bit to be gained from playing Earthbound afterwards, as I can attest to personally.
For sure. But
yeah, I mean, as far as JRPGs go, like, especially for its era, like, yeah, almost nothing is so far above it. There are things that I put on the same level, a few, but there's nothing that's so much better that you could say.
My gut feeling says between Mario Land 4 and Galaga.
I would actually put it right below Super Mario Brothers 3. That's my thought.
I'm kind of thinking the same thing. Yeah. And I mean, once you get into that upper echelon, you're kind of talking about, like, you're comparing like apples to oranges in this
sorts.
You're comparing apples to oranges in the sense that, would you want to live in a world without apples? Would you want to live in a world without oranges? Like, that's an impossible question. Everybody wants apples and oranges.
No, you got to get rid of apples. You need vitamins.
No.
I'm just saying.
I would get rid of a certain kind of apple, but I wouldn't get rid of look, you will take Granny Smith over my dead body. I want that Granny Smith apple.
Let's just say this. In terms of RPG-ness, ToeJam and Earl is not as good of an RPG as Earthbound by any stretch. I mean, it's a great game, but it's outclassed by Earthbound.
That is the thing, yeah.
So you just have to decide whether it's better than Bionic Commando, and I think it is. I don't think it's better than Super Mario Bros. 3 because that's a ubiquitous, like, primal game. I don't think you can beat Mario Brothers 3 with a lot of other games.
I do think that Mario 3 kind of iterated and improved upon the original Mario Brothers in a way that Earthbound did not, compared to its immediate predecessor in the series. It's like polishing a gem. It's like you've got kind of a dusty gem, and then you've got a supremely polished gem.
If you had to pick a game to show people what a video game was at first, and tell them this is the best of its kind and this is what a video game is, Super Mario Brothers 3 and World, we haven't even gotten to World yet, but they're so close and entwined in being that close.
Right.
That kind of game. But Earthbound is not the first example of a video game that I would pick.
No, and it's not even the game I would say, if you want to play a 16-bit JRPG, play Earthbound. I wouldn't say that. I would probably say, to be honest, play Final Fantasy VI first, and then play Earthbound.
Earthbound is a commentary on other RPGs.
In a way, yeah. I mean, but it's also different than other RPGs. And not just in that it's got a setting, art direction, and attitude that's different. It's also different in the way that the game is built. Like, it is a JRPG, but the way that, like I said, like Earthbound Beginnings, it is very, very thoughtful, and like there's not very much that's superfluous to Earthbound. That makes it different, and it makes it not hard but challenging in a way that other JRPGs of the time were not, because they had kind of accommodated players. It's like, no, you're going to have a gigantic inventory. You can have all kinds of weapons. If you want to carry around 10 different kinds of shields for whatever the situation, please be my guest. You can't do that in an Earthbound game. You can't.
I will say its smaller inventory is maybe a minor flaw. I can see why they did that. It is an interesting twist on its own.
I like the whole, like, courier aspect. Like, you need to drop off your stuff with your sister and all that jazz. I think that's something that, like, Resident Evil kind of, like, does a little bit better, by having a box that has, like, an infinity tube on the bottom of it, but
the game doesn't. There are very few points in either of the Earthbound games that I played, 2 of the 3, where I felt like, man, I wish I could just, like, amass a gigantic amount of hamburgers or whatever life restored restoration item. You don't have that experience. It's more like you will have to have 1 or 2 characters in your party who just do magic. And sometimes they're just doing buffs, especially later on in the game. And that is weird for a JRPG.
And I might add that the female character is actually the most powerful powerhouse in the game, and it's very unusual, especially for the time period, for that to be so.
Usually they're the generic healer.
Yeah, no, she is a wrecking ball in terms of her ability to wreck enemies with her magical abilities. In fact, I would pretty much say that that Ness is the healer, and he does the physical damage. But Paula is a really cool character to have in a game like this, especially for the time period.
And the game has got charm to spare. It's got bags and bags and bags of charm.
Definitely. I really, really appreciate the writing in this game. Like, in my own personal opinion, again, I feel like going through the effort most RPGs take for the plot they give you is like getting socks for Christmas. So, having a game where you really want to see what's coming and what people say is really refreshing, really special.
Yeah. Right, yeah. You're not like, oh my god, my rival collected the crystals before I thought to collect the crystals. It's like that's the average RPG of its time on its platform.
Yeah, and the thing is, RPGs aren't supposed to be that. Like, I've heard like early RPGs, the reason why you play them is to get those story bits. They're the reward for grinding, right? That's what you're trying to get. You're not doing the grinding for the grinding's sake.
Right, you're getting flavor
really,
text.
JRPGs of that period feel like watching a movie and having to fiddle with a menu about every 30 seconds or so, in my opinion.
And this game really rewards you for your efforts, and it's very satisfying.
And it makes you want to talk to every person in every town you go to.
Yeah, because the dialogue's so charming, and
right. It's a blessing and a curse, you know. It's like, yeah, it's funny. It's not really funny. It's not like something you're like, I gotta tell somebody about this joke. It's more like it's charming, and it's not too funny. It's just funny enough, and it feels like it's just directed towards you. I mean,
it's weird.
I don't know. It is weird. It's weird.
I think that's the best way to put it. Like, the sense of humor is not the kind of, like, it's not a joke you tell at a party. It's like you talk to that person because they're going to say something that you would have never expected anybody in a video game to say.
So we're saying below. Who's for below Bionic Commando? Who's for above?
I would say above.
We got 2 above.
Well, I mean, I'll just quickly say, you know, like, I mean, this is one of the look. I mean, you know, I don't love this game, but I know it's one of the better examples of what a JRPG can be when it's not just a JRPG, when it doesn't just go by the numbers. It doesn't just be like, right. Yeah, you just go and you go save a civilization with your knights and sword people and stuff. Go do that. Like, you know, it's a very interesting
quite
game.
Spiky enough, really.
Yeah, like, you know, hat. You wear a hat like that. What JRPG puts the main character in a hat?
No, you hide all that gorgeous hair underneath the hat. Yeah.
So when you look at it, like, it is like a very distinctive title, and I think it does what it does extremely well. But that means that I do think that in a lot of ways it is more interesting than Bionic Commando. Bionic Commando is great, but it doesn't really do too much other than be like, here's an interesting gimmick on a platformer. Earthbound is like, here is an interesting entire game.
Well, I mean, but isn't it just an interesting gimmick on the JRPG?
It's kind of like you have to keep re-hitting that mark to make it an interesting gimmick. Like, it's not like, oh, it's a smoking crow, that's the only thing we're doing interesting.
But
it's like,
how much more, like, if you're the guys like, we're making a platformer and you come with what if you have like an extending grappling hook arm that allows you to swing from platforms?
It is a very good, and that's why it's currently the second highest game on the list, because it's a grappling hook. You know,
and
like,
this game has Hip Tanaka, which is a big deal. Like, the music is incredible.
The thing is, if you've played a whole bunch of platformers, I'd be like, look, you don't have to play Bionic Commando. It's fine. But if you have, no matter how many JRPGs you've played, if you haven't played Earthbound, you can go, well.
So regardless of what I have to say, it's 3 against 2, and I've already kind of said my piece and then some.
I'm 100% sure I know where Satenga's going.
What else do you have to say, Satenga? Like, what can you add to this?
I mostly just wanted to say that Earthbound is one of those very few games that, you know, brings me back, you know, to that earlier time when the whole carefree and innocent thing, so to speak. While Mother 3 is technically a better game, and Earthbound Beginnings did lay almost all of the brickwork for this Earthbound in advance, it's just one of those good memories, one of those immutable, shining.
So you're going
spots.
to say above Bionic Commando,
above Super Mario Brothers 3, but no one is going to agree with me. I understand that no one is going to agree with me on that one.
Nobody does agree with you on that.
And it's already been thrown out. It doesn't even matter.
You can't see me, but I'm literally like backing away from my microphone right now.
Whoa.
Well, you remember last episode?
Don't associate with me with this weirdo.
Wait, you remember though that I was the guy trying to argue down SMB3, which is one of the greatest games of all time, but I've never felt as much love for it as I have for Earthbound.
I can see that, and I also feel like Earthbound connects to me personally on a level that Super Mario Bros. 3 can't, because it's not a narrative-based game.
Yeah, that's exactly
and
it.
Earthbound is not a like very super strong narrative, but it has a personality to it that, you know, you can't ignore it, and it makes you wistful for a time period that never existed, or a childhood that nobody has ever had.
It's like Iron Giant. You ever see Iron Giant?
Yes, exactly. It is like Iron Giant. Yeah, that's it. It is a made-up history that all of us wish we shared. It's an invisible country that we all once belonged to in our imaginations, but it isn't real.
That was supposed to be nostalgic in its day, and it still is, and it's going to continue to prey on anybody's nostalgia that either grew up in Japan or America.
You heard it here first. Earthbound Predator, a predatory game, preys on your nostalgia and weakness, right underneath Super Mario Bros. 3, right above Bionic Commando. That's all for this episode of HardcoreGaming101.net's Top Games Podcast. Special thanks goes out to at Louis Gornfeld, at Rinvi, at Miloscat, and at Rock and Roll for nominating the games we just talked about. And thanks as well to those of you who have nominated games that we haven't gotten to yet. You know who you are, and we will get to you soon. I promise. I totally promise. Thanks as well to our editor, Jeff Rudd, and our theme song composer, Muteki, and of course to the support of listeners like you. You can.
I don't get a thank you. I see what it is.
Well,
Yeah,
you're not a listener. You're a talker. You're talking directly into thousands of people's ears.
Hey, everybody.
Your voice goes straight to their brain. If anything, you should be thanking them.
We
But
do
don't do
thank
that.
them. Didn't we
Yeah.
just thank them?
Oh yeah. Sorry.
We love our listener base, though. You guys are our lifeblood. They're keeping us going.
We do love you guys.
Hey, where was that
Sincerely.
thing that you could look up that list again?
bit.ly/47k games. Nothing else. That's it. bit.ly bit.ly/47k games / don't ask me about this again, you
It's an
idiots.
Hey, we just said we
It's
love them,
Bitly.
dude. We're breaking our good.
I love you, but don't ask me where you can
Okay.
find your list again.
Tough
I
love,
tell
I
you
guess.
every episode, it's always there. It's always there. If you listen to it,
It's actually,
No.
you say this, we're just going to get trolls constantly pestering us.
And there's
everyone
water at the
loves
bottom
it.
of the
I don't know
ocean.
what you're talking about.
Oh, jeez.
You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/HG101. I know I do. And you can also support us by following at HG_101 and at GC9X on Twitter. But most importantly, help us claw our way to the top of the zeitgeist by getting on iTunes and subscribing to HG101 and giving us a 5-star review. Do it, or, well, my original joke was going to be I'll rank Earthbound even lower, but do it, or we'll talk about Ranger X for an additional 10 minutes. Until next time, keep keeping it real. So
I haven't eaten sushi in ages.
I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah, the sushi place near me that actually makes a rock and roll.
A rock and roll, huh?
Yeah.
And they spell it like that?
They don't spell it like that, but it's the same pun.
Ah.
They feed you rocks over there? America's freaking weird.
No, I think it's
And I
based.
mean ice.
I think it's based off of the film Rockarola by Guy Ritchie, which I haven't seen.
No, it's not. Nobody saw that movie. Nobody.
And I'm a Guy Ritchie fan, and I didn't see that.
I hear it's not bad,
When you've
but
been
I can't tell you about it.
When you've been overshadowed by Snap.